Welcome back to Before We Get It Right. So, today's episode is about grief. And before we even started recording, we both said this feels like one of the heavier conversations that we've had, but also one of the most important. Grief is something every single one of us will experience in some way, and yet it's still something that we struggle to talk about. We don't always know what to say, how to support people, or how to carry our own pain. And Catherine has experienced more loss in her 35 years of life than most people have ever, or never will, honestly. She lost her dad when she was 5. Not long after, she lost her brother. More recently, she's experienced the loss of her aunt, her mother in law, her dog of 15 years, her 6-month-old nephew, and a friend from high school. That is an unimaginable amount of grief. And one of the things about Catherine that I've always really admired is her ability to work through these things and not ignore them, but make them a part of who she is. Now, today I really just want to create space for an honest conversation about what that journey has looked like, how grief has shaped her, what she's learned, what's been hard, and what she'd want others walking through this loss to know. So, Catherine, thanks for being so willing to have this conversation.
It feels so weird to be the one being interviewed.
I know. Well, and I feel like, we each have parts of our lives that we haven't, like, we've touched on the podcast, but we haven't talked about too deeply. And this is one that I think since the beginning of starting this, we knew that this topic was going to come up and that we were going to do something
Yeah.
like this. So I'm glad that we're doing it in a way where I actually get to interview you, which is a different way, but I think it's also going to be able to, you're going to be able to share with everybody else, not only your experiences, but maybe some helpful ways in which they can navigate these types of situations too.
Yeah, no, I always knew this conversation was coming. And when we were thinking about topics for today, because we were unprepared, um, I thought that it was appropriate. So tomorrow is actually marks 30 years of my dad's passing. And leading up to an anniversary, I get in this reflective state. And so the idea came to me of, why don't we do this grief episode that we've been talking about doing for a while now? So,
Yeah, the timing really seemed perfect. And so I want to start pretty simply. So, Catherine, when you look at your life and your experiences with loss, how do you think that grief has shaped who you are?
a lot of different ways, and at different seasons of my life, it shaped me in different ways. Like, I think from when I was younger versus how grief has shaped me as an adult are just totally different ways. So it's kind of hard to answer that as just one way, but I think overall, one of how it has shaped me is growing up, I always had this victim mentality. It was, why me? Why did something like this have to happen? And I played into that a lot. And as I've become older, as I've become an adult, I've experienced more loss. I have also seen what playing the victim and kind of having that mindset, what that does to people long term. And I have really realized that is not how I want to live my life. It's a miserable and lonely place to be, and I did not want it to shape me into that or living my life that way. So I have worked on a lot. I've worked on myself a lot to like not let grief, not to use it as an excuse, I guess, in life.
Definitely. That is something that I've really noticed about you. I've said this many times that I feel like, again, you've used these situations as ways to, like, I don't know, continue to grow yourself as a person, And
When something tragic in your life happens, there's two different routes you can take. You can take the route of using it as an excuse to do bad, shitty things, let it turn you into something that you don't want to be. I think you can use it as an excuse. Again, it's kind of like that victim mentality of, I've seen people get into drugs and become drug addicts and blame it on someone dying. Like, you can do destructive things and go down that path, or you can sit in the tragedy and feel all of the feelings because they're all valid, whatever you are experiencing, but then you can use it to like be better and do good in this world. And let it shape you into a more like have more positive characteristics about yourself that you're proud of rather than going down that destructive path.
Definitely. Yeah, like you're the product of your environment, but also you're able to be who you are in spite of these things, you know?
Yeah. You have the choice. The choice is yours, whether whatever one you want to make. And there were times, I mean, growing up when I was younger, I did have that mindset and I did use it as an excuse to do bad and shitty things that like I shouldn't have done that I definitely regret. And it's taken a lot of work and a lot of time to look back on my behavior when I was younger.
When you deal with something like that at such a young age, I mean, your dad passed away when you were 5. So,
Mhm.
like, you're not only it's such a formative age and you're getting into adolescence and you're getting into all these things and you didn't have like this strong male figure to look up to. So when you're looking at what relationships should be like, what, because your mom never got remarried. She never
Mhm.
dated. Am I right?
Correct.
Yeah, so, like, you didn't have a model for any of
Mm-mm.
those things either, and so as you're trying to figure it out and figure yourself out without that, that's so, so, so much to navigate as a young person, and so when you're looking back to, like, just at your adolescence, being that young, how do you think that grief looked like, what did that look like as a child versus how you understand it now as an adult?
So to be honest, I think about this a lot. I was Ada's age when my dad died.
I saw
And
that
I think
yesterday.
of all of this time, and maybe Ada just has like a really great memory, but I feel like 5 years is that's a lot of time. Like, I feel like Ada's been here for a very long time. I don't even wanna speak this into the universe, but anything were to happen that, like, I would hope Ada would remember her dad, but at the same time, a lot of my childhood, even the years before that, my dad was really sick. Like, he battled cancer for, not my whole life, but those years where you start forming memories. And honestly, I think I blocked a lot of my childhood out. Like, there is so much that I do not remember. And I probably did that as like a protective coping strategy mechanism. I don't remember a lot. And so, as it shaped, I don't remember grieving as a child. As my dad was passing away, like, going into the room and being in there, but I honestly don't think logically or anything, any of that clocked in my brain until later.
When I think as kids, we also have the tendency to go into like a fight or flight thing. I think blacking out memories like that is super common for people who are navigating trauma. Have you had any memories pop up later in life that you had blocked as a kid?
Sometimes it's hard for me where I'm like, was that actually a memory I have? Or do I remember that because someone told me a story? Or do I remember that because I saw it on a home video or something like that, not knowing if I actually remember it or not? There is one distinctive memory that I do remember about my dad. It must have been when he was going through his treatment, but I remember he took me into our downstairs bathroom and he wanted to show me like this cool magic trick, and it was when his hair started falling out and he wanted it to be like a funny, not scary thing. And I remember he was able, he had me like touch his hair, and like I remember the hair falling out of the sink, and it was like this magic trick that he made it into something positive. But honestly, that is one of few that stand out to me.
That's
Which,
really
looking back
special.
on that, that's like really sad. But
Yeah, but also like really special that his
yeah,
intention was to make this hard experience, like bring some humor into something that was obviously really hard. And he was very conscious of how you were feeling.
yes, who is a very goofy, humorous person.
Yeah. Well, and I think something people don't realize is that grief does change how you grow. You don't just grieve the loss once, you grieve it again and again in different seasons, right? Is that something that you feel like you've experienced? Like grieving not just the person, but grieving all the things that they miss?
Definitely. I think my wedding day was bittersweet and those kind of big moments. But something that I've really learned, so just a little backstory, I did not grow up with any type of religion, any type of faith, nothing in my life. And it was, again, I had the mindset of, well, how could there be a God, or how could there be something out there that controls things? Like, how could they let this happen to me? And it actually wasn't until my nephew passed away in 2018 when I really turned to any kind of faith, because it was such a terrible experience that I didn't know what else to do. And it was one of those, like, well, if there is a God, I'm going to start praying to him, because what else do you do in this type of situation? And just being more open to that there is life after this. But that, I was an adult. I did not know anything like that or have any type of openness to that. And looking back now, I was always one. I used to think they should be here for the weddings. They should be here for the big moments, the small moments. It's so sad to me that, like, my dad hasn't met my kids. Like, that sucks. Sorry.
It's okay.
To think I wasn't going to cry during this was just a complete fail on my part, because if you know me, you know I'm a crier. So yes, I'm going to cry, but what I've really learned is that it's so much easier to, like, be open to the possibility that, like, they're actually not missing anything. Yes, we are missing them. And if you're experiencing any loss, there's days where I can talk about it and, like, it doesn't phase me, because it's like, well, it's been 30 years, Catherine, like, get over it, kind of thing. Every day is different. But what I have really learned is that I don't believe, and this is how I get through grief, is that they're not actually missing anything. We are missing them. We have every right to miss them. But if you look around, if you get quiet with yourself, if you ask for the signs, they're going to show you that they're still with you in whatever way that is. But you have to be open to it. And I was never open to it. And how I have survived so much grief, especially the year of 2025, which we could definitely get into that is how I get through it. And I'd rather live my life thinking that they're still with me and that there is a life after this, because I don't know, the alternative just doesn't seem like a great way to live, in my opinion.
No, and I think you feel it, right? Like, we've talked about this in past episodes. Julie was Catherine's mother-in-law, and she passed in 2025. And there have been so many moments in which Julie shows up for you. Like, you will be in the middle of something that's really intense, and now I'm crying. You'll be in the middle of something that's really intense, and you'll find something that when you found that note that she wrote you, and
Yeah.
it was so perfect for the moment, and it was like, finding those things, I don't think that happens by accident. And I think you're right. I think we have to be open to that, and I think that is when we are able to connect. And you seeking out more religion also in your life, I think, is so common, right? Because you need some faith. You're looking for answers. I think that is so, so common for people too. And I think whether it's spirituality or religion, finding something like some bigger meaning, right? I think helps us all navigate really challenging times when it comes to losing people.
I'm still figuring it out. I don't think, I don't consider myself a religious person. I did get baptized Catholic, though. That's another story. And that was actually when Theo, my nephew who passed away, which we can get into that too, when I was asked to be his godmother. And it, like, meant something to me. I do consider myself now more of a spiritual person, universe lover, but it has taken me a long time to get there. It doesn't happen overnight. It's definitely a journey. Different things have shaped me in different years of my life, but one thing that I do want to say about grief is that I used to think my grief was worse than someone else's. Up until recently, I will very much admit that. How is your grandma dying the same as me losing my 6-month-old nephew? Like, that is where my mindset goes.
I think that's common, though. You know what I
I
mean?
know, but
I
I
think
don't think
it's not
fair.
healthy, but it's
It's
common.
not healthy. It's not fair. But thinking that way was doing nothing for me. Like, who am I to judge someone's grief? Who am I to say their experience, like everyone's experience with grief is so different and so unique. It doesn't matter who you've lost. If anything, what I learned is that it was a block for healing for me and learning empathy. I always bring up grandparents because, there's a lot of grandparents that live very long, wonderful lives. And do I think it's fair that my nephew didn't get to live that long? Like, no, I don't think it's fair. But that's no reason to have this judgment on someone who lost a grandparent that they were super close with. If anything, what I did realize is that it was just a projection of my own relationship with my grandparents because I didn't have a relationship with my grandparents.
Right.
Like my mom's parents, I won't speak poorly of them, but I didn't have a good relationship with them. And my dad's parents, they had passed before I was even born. So I never got that like loving, great relationship that a lot of people have with their grandparents. And so who am I to say that or try to compare? I feel like the comparing doesn't get you anywhere. That is definitely what I've learned.
Well, and I think we never know, no, I think you're right. Like what I was about to say is that we never really know people's the relationships in which they have with others, right? So who are we to judge it? But at the same time, even if we did, who are we to judge it, And I completely understand what you're saying, though. I think that's a natural feeling. Like you talked about earlier, that you've been able to climb out of having more of a victim mentality, right? And looked at all of this as like, these are parts of who I am and this is what I've been through, versus like using that as, I don't want to say the excuse, but like justification for certain actions or decisions. And yeah, I do think though that it's hard. I think grief is hard for everyone, especially if it's like a first time loss. And I think people don't quite know how to navigate the feeling of what they believe to never see somebody again.
It's just kind of born into it since I was 5. And then a year later, my brother took his own life after my dad died. And so just growing up, grief was around me. And something I've had to realize is that there's a lot of people that don't experience something like that until they're older, and it's not their fault. Like,
Yeah,
I guess I just grew up differently, and like that's okay. And
right.
I can't hold things against other people because they haven't been through something similar.
Well, and I think at the same time, you sitting here talking about it and sharing your experience, because someone's going to listen to this and they're going to be like, oh, wow, I'm in the process of losing my dad. I'm in the process of losing someone. I don't know how I'm ever going to be able to get out of this, because this is coming from someone who has lost two people really in their life, three people in their lives who they found themselves close with. The closest person that I've lost in my life was my grandfather. Him and I were very close. But it was,
Sorry, I wasn't talking
I didn't
specifically.
take it personally whatsoever. I did not at all. I didn't even reflect on myself when I was responding. So you're good. But I lost a teacher when I was in 3rd grade who like I was close with, because I went to a small school. There were 5 of us in the classrooms. Parental kind of figure, right? And I was young when that happened, and I don't remember feeling much of anything. I just remember it happening and me wanting to feel more but not being able to. And I think that the idea though to me of like losing a parent, it just internally when I think about that, and I know just in our overall family that some like there's sickness, there's other things like that's going to happen at some point. And it's just a really scary thing for me. So to even see someone like you who's experienced it 10 times over in so many different ways come out of it being the person that you are, it is very inspiring. It makes you feel like you can navigate these really hard things. So I just appreciate you sharing.
What other choice do you have? You just get through it. And even on the days where you don't even know how you're going to do it, I mean, I look at my sister. So I would like to just give some backstory and detail about my nephew Theo because I just love to talk about him. So he was diagnosed with congenital heart disease. So he was going to be born with an imperfect heart. There were some issues going on. We knew that at Callie's 20-week ultrasound, but we didn't know like the extent. And so when he was born 32 weeks, and he was born at 3 pounds and 3 ounces, needing open heart surgery. So if you can imagine doing surgery on this itty little bitty heart. He was so tiny. The doctor basically gave my sister 50-50 shot, like if he was even going to survive surgery. But he did. And he kept fighting. He went through more surgeries. And ultimately, when he was around 6 months old, he was just very, very, very sick. And he was done fighting. And I wasn't a mom at this time. I did not have kids yet. This was the first like baby in our family. And I look back as to how my sister got through that time. I mean, my sister has experienced the same amount of loss I have, like same dad, brother growing up, but this is her kid. This was like a completely new ball game of grief trying to handle that and looking at how she was able to, I don't wanna say come out on the other side of it because you never come out on the other side. Like, you are forever changed, life is forever changed, but she continues to move forward, and she has done amazing things in his honor. You wanna talk about taking 2 different paths. My sister started a nonprofit, and we have raised over $1 million for congenital heart disease, and she has done amazing things. And then you have Theo's biological father, her ex-husband, who went down a completely different route and used it as an excuse to do a lot of terrible things. And I won't go into details about that, maybe someday. And I'm just really proud of her. And I was with her navigating it every step of the way. And we like to use the analogy in our family about having a grief case. It's something that you're always carrying. That grief case is always with you. It's not going anywhere. Some days it feels lighter. Some days you feel like you can set it down. Some days it feels super heavy. And there's times in my sister's even day to day where I can tell, especially if like an anniversary or birthday or something's coming up, I check in to ask her like how full her grief case is. And it's just been this analogy that has kind of stuck with us to explain like where we're at in how we're feeling during certain times in our lives.
Definitely. Well, and I'm sure, looking over all the different seasons where you have felt grief, because at all these different seasons, you were also different ages, you were at different life phases, you were a different person. Like, were there ever any seasons where you just felt like you were surviving?
2025, Leah.
And
2025.
I know this.
So the year of 2025 really pushed me. And I there was that medium that I met with that basically she told me all of my loss, everything that I have suffered, everything that I've gone through somehow is going to help me in life, and I'm going to do something with it, and I'm going to help other people. I haven't figured that out yet, but she has told me to look for the lessons out of the loss, which I think can be extremely hard to do. And I don't think that's something you could even touch until you're a little bit ways out, because 2025 was the year I literally just had to survive.
Well, and I will say, not to interrupt you, but on top of the loss that Catherine experienced, which again, her mother-in-law, her aunt, and her dog of 15 years, she also, I mean, Brad got in a terrible car accident where he could
Mhm.
have very easily not made it. It was a terribly scary situation. You had other family members who ended up in the hospital.
Well, and then Brad's dad was in the
Well,
hospital,
with a
and we thought,
crazy infection that you guys like didn't know what the heck was happening.
to give people context, so January 3rd, my mother-in-law passed away. She had battled cancer for a long time, and we like knew it was coming, but we weren't sure exactly when it was coming. It was not even 2 weeks later, my aunt, the aunt that I was closest with, and still shocking to this day, is no longer with us. And it happened very sudden, very unexpected.
Was
And
the day of your mother-in-law's funeral, wasn't it?
well, yeah, so it was my mother-in-law's funeral, and my uncle, her husband, had drove down and was with me all day. And then he got a call at like 5 p.m. I was not notified. I was notified at like 5 a.m. the next day. By the way, we also, our entire family got neurovirus at my mother in law's
You're
funeral.
so sick.
So I had Ada, Elena, myself, and Brad up all night, just super sick. And so I had all these missed calls from Callie at like 5 a.m. I was so sick. And she was like, "You need to pick up your phone." And I answered, and she was like, told me what had happened. I was in complete shock. And then, yeah, I was up in Minnesota, navigating that. I don't even think I processed like my mother in law dying because it was like on to the next one. And then my dog started having seizures, which again, TJ, I had always asked him for 15 years and he gave me that, but he started having seizures the day before Julie's funeral, and I thought I was going to have to put him down that day before the funeral. And then I told him, I said, TJ, you literally cannot die on me right now. And the little guy hung on, and he gave me a couple more months. So
He was there for you at a time you needed him.
he stuck it out. If you've lost a pet, it sucks. TJ had been with me through the most like formative years of my life. I got him when I was in a deep depression stage after like a bad breakup my freshman year of college, and he was with me ever since. He met both of my kids. I mean, you have that pet that is just everything for you. I miss him every day, and I'm glad we got Hootie now, but that it was just a lot of loss in 2 months. That, and then I was like, all right, 2025 can be a little more chill. And then, yeah, my husband got in a really bad car accident in July, survived, but like easily could have died or been paralyzed. So that was like a very shocking situation. And then his dad went into the hospital. We thought he had a stroke. There were all these crazy things going on. He like wasn't able to talk. We didn't know if he was going to be like a vegetable for the rest of his life. And I was like, my kids just lost their grandma. How am I going to explain to them that they're losing their papa too? Like it felt like one thing after
It
another.
was
And
every time I talked to you. Every
I
time I talked to Katherine, it was like another thing, and I was like, "I just wish I could take some of this from you so you don't have to go through another thing," 'cause it just was it was too much.
And I don't personally think I needed any more lessons about gratitude, but looking back, and now that I'm far enough away from that year, because I was just surviving that year, that's
Mhm.
literally all that I could do, which I mean, it was just last year, but you know, it ended on a fine note. But there were so many lessons about gratitude in that year that I think I could easily look at the year and be like, that year was awful, completely sucked, nothing great about it. But I really have done some reflection and have found a lot of gratitude in it. I think a lot of the time we get wrapped up in the shit that doesn't matter. We are trying to get ahead in our career. We're trying to make money. We're worried about financial stress. We're stressed about the daily kid chaos, the mundane, literal daily shit that we get stuck in. And it's so easy to do. I do it all the time. But and I don't want to say that you need something bad to happen to kind of shake you to your core to snap you out of that. But for me, that's definitely what it did. Things like that, it can really just quickly shift your mindset and your mentality or your outlook on life, because truly, and I have learned, things can really change in a second. And when I think about the other lessons that I've learned, I think about my mother in law. My mother in law taught me like the true meaning of quality time and having special moments. And I wasn't taught that. And she is the one that taught me that. And since her passing, it has been a challenge, but I've really had to step up my game to try to fill that void for my kids. But it's been good for me to do that. The other layer, that there's a lot of moms I know that listen to this podcast, but watching your kids go through loss really sucks. Like, there is absolutely no magic secret to make it easy, because it's not easy. It's absolutely soul crushing. And losing her has given me an opportunity to teach my kids at a young age some more healthy coping skills that I kind of wish that I would have had, and having that open communication and telling Ada. I mean, Elena's too young. She has no idea. She knows that when she sees a butterfly to say hi to Nana, but like she doesn't understand. And it's sad that I don't think she'll remember her, but Ada definitely does. And I tell Ada, like, cry as much as you want. Like, you need to feel how much it sucks. Like last night, she even said randomly, like, I really miss Nana. And we pulled out books that Julie had recorded. You know, those books. I highly recommend, if your parents, even right now, while they're young and healthy, whatever, buy them some of those books.
What
And
books?
I'll send you some links. So there are books that you can buy that grandparents or whoever actually can record themselves reading the book. I pull those out all the time for Ada. There's one that she has where Nana and Papa are reading it, and then she also has one that just Julie is reading to her. And it's really nice to have those types of things. And Julie definitely planned for stuff like that because she was just so thoughtful. Like that's who she was. And we really want to protect our kids from feeling hurt, but the reality is that they're going to experience things that suck, that hurt their loss. Like, it's just going to happen, and we can't stop that from happening. We can try to protect them and do our best, but at the end of the day, they are going to experience grief and hurt, and it's a part of life. And what I've learned is that it gives an opportunity for us as parents to teach them how to grieve, or at least, like I mentioned, those healthier strategies. And there's no one way to do it. Unfortunately, I wish I could tell you that there is, but I'm not here to give you a playbook of steps of how to grieve, because everyone's grief journey, like I've already mentioned, it's so unique and so different. And what I have learned, though, is that it does open up the door for communication. And I think with your kids, communication is key between the kid and the parent. I'm someone coming from the other side of that. There wasn't a lot of communication. And looking back, my mom became a single parent with a 5 and 10-year-old. She was in survival mode. But, like, I mean, just as an example of how much I struggled with communication when I was younger, if I was like in a fight with my mom or something, especially in the teenage years, like we all have, I didn't actually ever talk to her about anything. I would actually write letters. Like, that's how I felt like I could express myself. And it's actually, I hate to admit, but it's how I feel like I can best still express myself to this day. And it's something that I'm really working on. And one thing that I want to do as a parent with my kids, especially when it comes to grief, is I want them to have that open door of communication to tell me how they're feeling. Because surviving grief is hard, but it's even harder if you try to bury it. And I don't want my kids to grow up trying to bury their grief.
No, no. And I think that that's such a beautiful way to be able to think about it too. Because I know, a lot of us, when we feel things that are really hard or we feel things that are really uncomfortable, we tend to try and not feel them. It's kind of like when your kid is having a meltdown, you're trying to get them to stop having a meltdown in that moment, but we're not really like always thinking about the root cause of the meltdown. And like maybe their feelings are actually valid. They just don't know how to express themselves. But like, I think from a young age, we're always taught to like calm down and not feel. So when you go through something this significant, I feel like you have to feel it in your bones in order to be able to cope and move on. Because if you don't feel it, it's just, I think that feeling probably just has to grow so much.
It does, and it affected me up until adulthood, until I actually really started my healing journey, I guess you could call it. But that didn't happen for a long time, and it took a lot of work to get to where I am today. So if you're sitting there going through something, you're like, "Oh, it's not that easy." I definitely know. I know it's not that easy, and I've had to dig really deep of a lot of things that I have buried from my past, and a lot of the loss that I have experienced. I did try burying it. And what I can tell you as an adult, like, it comes back up in one way or another.
Yeah.
So like when Ada's sad, we pull up pictures. Pull out videos. We talk about her. Like, we do all of the things. And I sit back and I'm like, how great is that she is learning this at 5 years old? Like,
Yeah,
that's something I'm really proud of as a parent.
you should be. That's amazing. That's huge, and that's also, I think, emotionally, she's gonna be able to handle a lot and be able to trust herself in being able to get through it. So I know there are a lot of people out there who haven't necessarily experienced grief, but maybe they know somebody who is, and they want to be there for them, but it can feel awkward. You don't know what to say, you don't know how to approach it. What are things when you look back on some of these moments, what are things that people said or did that genuinely did help?
Before I answer that question, there's one more thing I want to add to the whole like when your kids lose a grandparent. That
Mhm.
means like you as the parent, you're either losing your parent or an in-law, which I learned how to grieve as a parent, which I think is so different from like the loss I experienced at a younger age. Like you literally just you can't fall apart and lay in bed and cry and do nothing for days on end, you know? You still have to show up and you still have to take care of your little humans and there is nothing easy about that, especially in 2025 when I said I was surviving. I didn't even get to feel any grief because I was just holding it all together, you know? And then, especially after my husband's car accident, when he was out of commission for a bit, if you are someone going through that, I want you to know that like just being in survival mode is okay. And if you can just find even one tiny moment, what if you go in your pantry or your closet or somewhere where you just need to cry it out, your car for 5 minutes, I feel like we do that anyways, right? Sometimes as parents, when we need to lose it, like give yourself those tiny little moments to do that because that is one of the only ways I survived grieving as a parent while my kids are also grieving.
Mhm.
But okay, back to your question. What is helpful? I would say the one thing that I truly appreciate, so like my dad tomorrow will mark 30 years that he's been gone. I still have some friends that text me every year on that day, even if I haven't talked to them in a long time. And their text could be, I'm thinking about you today with a heart. You don't even have to use an emoji, actually. Just any little inkling of remembrance because and I know like my sister's biggest fear is like people forgetting about Theo, which we've made it our life's mission to we talk about him all the time. Our nonprofit Project Bubbloo, like his nickname was Bubbloo. Like that's a legacy that he will always have and we will never stop talking about him. But I think when you experience loss, that's one of the fears is that this person is going to be forgotten. And so just to text, I think anniversaries are huge. My husband thinks birthdays are like more meaningful to be celebrated. For me personally, it's anniversaries. So it also depends. Well, when Julie was going through stuff, send groceries or like if people need help with meals, if it's summertime and there's a tragedy going on with like a neighbor, mow their grass. You know, those little things that like when you are grieving, you don't want to have to worry about. But I would say the number one thing is as the time passes, because when you're in the thick of it, I even think about like when my aunt passed away. I was in Minnesota for a while with my uncle and cousins, but like I eventually had to go back to my daily life, you know? And that's when people get quiet, they stop checking in, they stop doing the little helpful things, which I totally get. Like that's a part of life. But as the time passes, still check in on people. It's really easy not to do that because your daily life might not be affected by this loss, but a quick check-in of, "Hey, how are you doing?" Like that really does go a long way.
Yeah, and I think that that's a very simple and straightforward way to be able to approach it, to not
Like
overthink
Leah
if you're
put it
dealing
in
with
her
it. Just
calendar that my dad's anniversary is tomorrow.
yeah, and I've had
So if you
those
don't
in
text
there.
me, I'm gonna be mad. I'm just kidding.
You will text you. But I do. I think that those things just in general, the thoughtfulness, the acknowledgement that like, hey, I know today's a like today means a lot to you. Just thinking about you and how you're feeling. And I think that sometimes people get nervous about saying too much or saying too little, but I think that that is just such the perfect level of care to show.
You don't really have to say anything else than that, and again, don't I would say the one thing, and I know the one thing that, like, drove my sister crazy is, like, when you try to relate too much. After Theo died, she would have people saying, "Yeah, I had a miscarriage at" whatever like, that trying to relate to someone that is not in the exact situation as you, it's just not helpful. But again, I know people don't know what to say, and then like sometimes word vomit just comes out. I would say keep it simple, keep it short.
Absolutely. What if you are in the same situation as someone? Like, what if someone did lose their dad? You know what I mean? And then they talk to you. Do you feel like that's a little bit? Because I get what you're saying.
When it comes to child loss, that's just like not something you should touch on. I will say, like, Callie has made so many friends of people in the CHD community that have been through what she has been through, and they have really bonded over that. Yeah.
Comparing it in those moments probably isn't the right thing to say no matter what. And also, if you want to connect with someone who's been through something similar to you at the same, just in general, right? Like, I wouldn't, if my dad passed away, I would know that you know what it feels like to like not have your parent, but I wouldn't necessarily be like, you know, I don't know, the way in which you experienced it would be so insanely different because of the fact that like I am an adult and now my kids are the age that you were, right? So it is like
Mhm.
a different situation.
Which is okay.
Yeah,
And I think the people in your life, you really just have to lean into the ones that are just like there and they listen. Like you don't necessarily have to speak. There are plenty of times in 2025 where I'm voice messaging you and like I know you had no idea what the hell to say, but you let me just talk. Like you listened. And I think the listening it really goes a long way. And it's
totally.
remembered.
Yeah, it's one of those things I think that it's like it is like the absolute least you can do, you know? And
Mhm.
we recently had just something tragic I shared that happened to a friend of ours with regarding their child. The child's fine now, but it was very intense. And like even in those moments where it's a big, huge thing that's going on, like you almost don't know what to say and you want to make sure that they feel comforted in there. And like when I reached out to her, what I said was just, I'm here for you and whatever you need. If you don't need to respond, you don't need to do anything. And I think that that in itself is kind of a big thing to do, right? Like just letting someone know, like, I'm here for you in any capacity, checking in, but like not expecting anything from them. Like they
Right.
don't have to give you anything. So I think, we're running out of time. I feel like we could go on even so much more on this topic, but I do have one
Maybe
last
we'll do
question.
a part 2 someday.
Yeah. Well, what if, if somebody wants to reach out and they want to share any questions they may have, because this is such a challenging topic, I think, for so many of us who are going through it, just know that you're welcome to reach out to like the before we get it right at gmail.com. Katherine answers that. And maybe if any questions do come in, it could be something we address in a future episode and are able to answer.
Yeah, definitely. Or find us on Instagram before we get it right. I also monitor that. And just know that if you are going through a difficult time, no matter what, if it is a recent loss, I'm just here to tell you that you're not alone and that there is life on the other side of it. And we're permanently affected by grief, by loss, but it can change you into an even better human. And that is the route that I have chosen to take. And I can tell you from experience that my life is much more fulfilling going down that route.
So I do have one last question. And
Yes.
so I think one of the biggest takeaways from the conversation really is that grief is not linear and it doesn't really follow rules. It doesn't fit neatly into these stages. It changes us each time it happens. For someone who is in the thick of grief right now, someone who just feels shattered, angry, numb, or even just completely lost, what would you want them to know?
I would tell them don't bury how you're feeling. If you're angry, be angry. Sit with that anger. Like, let that anger be there. Let it coexist with you. Let the sadness be there. Whatever those feelings are, you need to feel them. And I wish I would have done that at a younger age. I wish I would have sat with my feelings more because the more that you do that, like the easier it is for you to move forward with your grief case that I mentioned earlier. And don't judge yourself for whatever you're feeling. You have to let it all out. I know we've said this in previous episodes, but like you really do have to feel it to heal any part of it.
Yeah, just feel it all. I think that's great advice. All right. Well, Catherine, thank you again so much for sharing so many of these things. I know this conversation is going to mean a lot to a lot of people, and to everyone listening. We're just really glad you're here. So we'll see you next time.
See you next week. I have to find a topic to interview you about.
Oh